Pleasers. I am so excited to have my guest, Dr. Brett, here today, helping us to conquer obstacles holding us back in life. Dr. Brett, thanks so much for being here today.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Nice to meet you. Great to be here.
Yes. Yes, great to have you here. So, you're a sports psychologist, a life coach, so many
Yeah.
great things. I'd love to
hmm
know the people that listen to this podcast resonate with the idea that we tend to put ourselves last. We sometimes say yes to too many things, might feel resentful towards those things, have the obstacle of accommodating lots of people. Can you share, Dr. Brett, if you've had an experience with being a people pleaser in your life, what that looked like for you?
I think many of us have. I think when the first time we talked, I playfully said something: the narcissists on this planet don't have to worry about that. That said, those of us that are in the helping profession where we care about others, not just self, all of us probably, or most of us have had that challenge probably a million times. I'm an identical twin, right? So I'm on this planet to make a difference. And I love my twin, and he does Wall Street and, stocks and trading and all that stuff. And, it's been a difficult journey that way because we had sort of diametrical opposite sort of paths in some ways. And yet we have so much in common as well. And so as a result of that, that challenge between self and other is something that I'm always like helping people find. In my life, my mother was a giver, and I'm a giver. And so I've often in my 20s and 30s put other people first. And now I've sort of found that right balance between self and other in my 40s and 50s. But those first decades of being an adult were rough just because, when you put other people first, a lot of times you get taken advantage of. Not that many
Mhm.
people reciprocate. So,
Yeah, yeah. And was there a catalyst or something that caused you to shift away into your 40s and 50s from that
yeah,
type of behavior?
yeah, that's a really good question. So, I did like probably a good decade of helping thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the burbs in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and that didn't lead to happiness. And
Mm.
so, as a result of that, I unhooked my life and I traveled. I put my business on the phone. This was like 15 years before COVID. And I traveled into the relative unknown at the time. I didn't realize the United States, is fairly known, but you know what I mean? But it was a long time ago. And so I lived in places like Santa Fe and Boulder and Sonoma and really cool
Yeah.
places. And I was doing life out of the box. And I wound up working with this, I don't have a nice way of saying it, but let's just say he was a Kundalini master type, and I lost my ability to sleep for months, and I went through a
Wow.
devastating health crisis at 40, lost my entire business, lost my health, my self esteem, most of my assets, and the woman at the time, and so I got completely annihilated on this life's journey. And I had to come back to Connecticut, where I'm a licensed psychologist, and start over, and that rebuild took 3 or 4 years. Only a year to build my business back because I was so suicidally depressed. I basically had two choices: either kill myself or build it back. And I was able to do that through sheer tenacity. But the health aspects of it took years, and the emotional pieces took years in terms of letting go of I had just a lot of I was pretty heartbroken. I had a lot of anger and resentment for a while. And I realized that, a lot of it was just not honoring myself, really. I didn't know
Mhm.
how to honor myself even at 40 years old. With helping others doesn't necessarily teach you how to honor you. It can, and it
Mhm.
doesn't do it fully. So sometimes it's our own life experiences.
Yeah, that's big. And so, what's an example or two of how you teach people to honor themselves?
Well, that's that balance that we're constantly searching for, right? So,
Mhm.
self-expression is really important on this planet. I tell people I'm a genetic Jew, which means I'm not a Buddha. And so we like to self-express. It's not just about going inside, but I do go inside for answers. I meditate a lot. And when you meditate a
Mm,
lot, you don't always have to express. Sometimes you can let things go in meditative states. But
mm,
a lot of times that self-expression is just such an important part of relationships, right? And so
yeah.
being able to say, I love you and I'm not doing that. Or I love you when I
Yeah.
don't feel comfortable, right? Going out to dinner 3 nights a week and feeling bankrupt at the end of the year, whatever it is that you need to
Mhm.
do to, speak your truth. And a lot of people, they struggle to speak their truth in part because short term, sometimes there's consequences, right? One out
Yeah.
of 10 times we'll get hit in the face, but
Yeah.
7 or 8 times out of 10, it probably will be favorable, especially if you do
Mhm.
it a lot, you learn how to do it well.
Yes, I love that. And so we're thinking about conquering obstacles. You obviously conquered some massive obstacles.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, so for the people that are keen to listen for that reason, what's the guidance that you would give them to help them conquer these obstacles that are holding them back?
I think fundamentally, and this because of your profession as well, I think our habits are primary. Right.
Mhm.
So, I meditate between 4 and 5 a.m. most days of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm going to meditate, one, two, three, 4 times a day. And so that's a really amazing habit. It's part of training your mind, not just as an athlete, but as a friend, as a lover, as a business person, and so on. So, exercise,
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way to exercise every day of my life, in some way. I'm a little bit injured and banged up at the moment. So, I just do it in creative ways. There's a freezing cold
Yes.
pool in my backyard. So, throw myself in that freezing cold pool. So meditation, exercise, eating well, as you know, right? You're
Mhm.
well, you're well into this space of, trying to eat, pretty well. And so
Yeah.
we stay away from, Doritos for the most part, and I don't, I playfully say that if you drink and smoke too much, you're fucked on this planet. Like, it's just not going to go well, right? I mean, it's just really, so you just want to keep the drinking and smoking to a minimum, and you want to try to eat the avocados as much as possible here. These are
Mhm.
metaphors, obviously, for
Yeah.
paying attention to your diet because this is feeding your neurochemistry, your brain, right? So,
Mm.
and your gut health, paying attention to your gut health, right? So I'm
Yes.
always working with people on multiple levels, but all these athletes, they spend a lot of time on their physical bodies, right? In order to,
Yeah.
so we're training their minds, but they're usually doing the physical body piece. But if they have habits that are screwy, we're going to address those habits, and then we're going to set up a foundation for success. So the meditation, the exercise, the eating well is part of that foundation. Expression is also part of it, right?
Yes.
Most people are not expressing themselves regularly and well.
Yeah. I love that you are reminding us that we might have these big obstacles that seem like how can I possibly overcome these big challenges, but you're talking about your own life, your own experience. You're demonstrating every single day that it's these small things that we're doing, if we do them consistently, how they can make such a big deal and make a big difference to overcome the challenges. So I did see in my research before we were chatting, there's some phrasing around bang up communication. I want to
It's,
know more about this. Talk to me about
yeah.
bang up
Well,
communication.
there's Well, it's just, look, the idea is that nobody's perfect and we're not going to be perfect. We're not striving for
Mhm.
perfection, but the more we communicate, the better we're going to get at it, especially if we're course correcting along the way. And that's part of what I live and teach is that, we're constantly learning from mistakes. So if I have adolescents and, I'll have them watch the movie, adolescent males will have them watch the movie Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray. Remember from 20 years
Yeah,
ago? But
yeah,
he's constantly learning from his mistakes. He gets better and better, and then of course he gets the woman at the end, right? But I try to have kids do it in a sincere way, not as a dog and
mm,
pony show, right? To actually
yeah,
get better at life, get better at relationships, get better at baseball, basketball, football, tennis, soccer, whatever it is,
mm,
because they're training their mind, but they're also learning to self-express along the way, and that's a trial and error process, right? So the more
yeah.
we play with communication, the better. I playfully, this weekend, we're having dinner with one of my favorite clients down here in Palm Beach County. And I met this guy on an airplane 8 years ago by sitting next to him. He was not a friendly guy at the time, 8 years ago. And he says that I nudged his headset. I did not do that. I'm pretty polite. But I did tell this total stranger, I did say, so you're a CFO. And he was so shocked that I guessed what he did for a living, that we wound up in a conversation, and then he took my business card, and 6 months later he called me up for coaching, and I've been guiding him ever since. And it's just, he's a tremendous human being, but that ability to just sort of take a little bit of risk. It's nothing crazy. We're not climbing the Himalayas here, with that, without a rope or whatever. What's that guy, Eric Hummel, whatever, that goes up Half Dome or whatever? Can't remember his name, but I'm asking people to just be a little bit more curious, a little more engaging, and take a little bit of risk. And if your intuition is suggesting something, to share it, right? And then you never know what gets created. And I could tell you 50 more stories about stuff like that, guessing what people do for a living, or creating friendships out of just a little bit of interpersonal curiosity, or a little bit of interpersonal adventure.
Yeah. I can feel that from you, that you are a person that seizes the moment and begins those conversations.
I was single for a long time before I got married. So that'll do it. Right.
Wow.
But yes, I like that. I do like to take a lot of action. That's another thing, as I live and teach the proactivity thing, right? And so I think most people that are successful tend to be proactive. I've worked with immensely successful people, men, women, whatever. I've worked with an occasional billionaire, lots of hedge fund managers, and even a movie star. And you'd be surprised how many people are worth hundreds of millions of dollars or more, and their personal lives are not great, in part because they're not proactive in certain other areas. They might be proactive at work, but they're not proactive at home. And so it's important that we're proactive pretty much everywhere, right? We're not passive. One of my fun expressions, Dr. Brettisms, is that passive people fry like bugs in a bug zapper on this planet, right? Planet Earth responds to proactivity well.
Yes. So be proactive. I love that. You wrote a book called Conversations with Dr. Brett. Can you give me a little highlight?
Well, when my life got annihilated and I started over, I moved to Los Angeles once I put my health and business back together. And I was bi-coastal LA to Connecticut for years. And when I lived in LA, I was writing this massive story based on the destruction of my life, which I'll probably rewrite one day, but I didn't publish that big story. And when my editor had the big story, I was walking to this coffee shop every day with my dog Tuck to write in Century City, and I met this young woman at the coffee shop. I had her hold my dog while I went inside for an iced tea or something. My Labradoodle Tuck. He's still on my wrist right now as a memento. Like it says, if love alone was enough, he would have lived forever. Right? We had such a bond. But anyway, I wound up writing an ebook in 30 days, more or less, while I had the time in between the big story. I was coaching people on the phone and everything. And it was really about teaching this young woman about communication and relationships, and guiding her how to train her mind in the process. Because with every athlete, every person I help, entrepreneur, business person, whomever, we're always doing a combination of helping people train their minds, and then also learn how to do communication and self-expression at a higher level. And the vast majority of people are just not that good at it. That's not part of our education system.
Yes, I agree. The communication side of things gets me a bit fired up as well, in a place where we can really make a difference in our lives, for ourselves, for other people. When you have the ability to share what you're feeling. I love what you're saying. And you're working on a program called 30 Days to Mental Toughness. And is that just for athletes? Tell me about that.
Well, I do talks on the fundamentals of the mental game, right? And the fundamentals of the mental game are basically the power of presence, the power of patience, the power of poise, the power of perseverance, and inside each, overall category or subcategories. So, for instance, under the power of presence, you have meditation, mindfulness, visualization, and breath work, right? And so
Yeah.
that's part of the fundamentals of training your mind. And then under patience and poise, there are other fundamentals there. And so I'm
Mhm.
working people through that program, whether it's in a group process or one on one. And I do
Mhm.
talks on that. And I do consulting for businesses on the fundamentals of the mental game. And so that process, it's not easy for everybody to train their mind, but this is really the way, because otherwise, we live in a culture that takes meds and all this other
Yeah.
garbage, right? A lot of people are on
Yeah.
antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs, and seven, eight, nine times out of 10, that's really just not the way. If you're exercising, if you're meditating, if you're eating well, as you know, right? And if your relationships are really good, right, and you're handling life and business well, you don't need antidepressants. Those are for a very small subset of people. Unfortunately, it's too common in our culture where people want a quick fix, right? And
Yeah.
so they're going in directions that aren't healthy. And so I'm doing this, mental toughness thing as a way of helping people train their minds and bring their game to the next level, everywhere, right? Relationships, business, sports, all of it, right? Even as lovers, whatever, you can take your game to the
Mhm.
next level.
So, when you think about, let's say, the people that you're doing business or life coaching with, not necessarily your athletes, but these individuals, where do you see them holding themselves back the most?
I think again we always come back to habits, right? So people that
Mhm.
are drinking and smoking too much, that it's especially the weed is just so prevalent in our culture, and a lot of people say it's medicinal, but if you smoke weed every day, it's not medicinal. It really isn't. It just wrecks your short-term memory, and it wrecks your motivation, and it wrecks a lot of your positive habits. People just aren't as
Mhm.
sharp. They really are not. So there's a lot of weed. There's a lot of drugs and other substances, and if you there's a lot of vaping, like there's just too
Mhm.
much vaping, so and that wrecks your whole adrenal system, and it causes all kinds of anxiety. And so
Mm.
we have this, the addictions are rampant, and so we have to constantly address some form of addiction. And most people are addicted to something, and if they're not addicted to something, they're addicted to thought. Right? So we're helping them again train their mind, because if they're not,
Mhm.
right, that addiction to thought is super intense as well, right? People overthink. So the vast
Oh,
majority of people that I work with start off by overthinking, right?
yeah.
Um, Occasionally you'll meet somebody that doesn't think enough, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time they're
That's
overthinking.
pretty rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
habits always coming. The foundation is your habits, right? To set up your
Mhm.
successful life. Successful people in general have successful habits. We live in a culture that, really pushes in general, financial success, but that's only a part of the mix, right? Again, I've coached
Mhm.
so many people that are worth so much money, and it's only, that's not gonna. It's wonderful to have pesos and to have freedom, but you also need the ability to create emotional intimacy, and that isn't
Mhm.
always easy for a lot of people, even women.
Yeah. Well, like you
Yeah,
said, it's not something that we were taught. So
yeah,
I'd love to go back in time a little bit to this huge moment in your life, this huge time in your
oh,
life, and you're
there
talking
is,
about these important habits.
yeah.
Which was the habit that you started with? I'd love for you to tell me a bit more about that.
Would in my 20s in grad school in psychology, one of the things I say about grad school in psychology is, are you there? You still there? I feel like I lost you for a sec, Amy. Hmm. Did I lose you? 19. Hmm. Hmm.
Love technical difficulties.
I think it's because he's been up twice.
There we go.
Can you hear me okay?
And we're back.
All
We
right,
are
good.
back. In your 20s, you were saying.
I can't see you though right now.
Oh, great. Well, I can see you. And I can't see you again. Oh, no. Well, we've lost Dr. Brett for a moment. Maybe if you leave and come back, Dr. Brett, then we can continue the conversation. I love what Dr. Brett was saying about
Okay, here we are.
the idea of habits, and you were sharing, you went through this huge life changing, life altering time. And I was curious, Dr. Brett, because you share now that you're doing this beautiful practice of around meditation for significant amounts of time in your day. But I can't imagine that after such a giant crisis, you automatically could jump into such long periods of meditation. Walk us through what were the beginning habits that you started focusing on to pull yourself out of that dark time, that very huge moment in your life.
Yeah, so what I was starting to say was I started meditating in my 20s, so I've been meditating for decades. And the way I survived the first sleep disturbance by, I literally couldn't sleep for months at all, like no more than 20 minutes a night, sometimes an hour. But for 3 months, I didn't sleep more than an hour a night. And it is survivable, but barely. I was meditating 5, 6, 7 hours a night in order to survive the first one. The second one, I barely survived. It happened a year later. So the ability to meditate is something I've built a muscle over decades, right? And so now, when my mom died 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it is, when she had her stroke and I was devastated, I would just sit in meditative states and allow the sort of emotions, the grief to wash through me. That's a muscle. You got to build that muscle. It's not going to happen overnight. All these kids that I coach, everybody, the athletes, the entrepreneurs, the business people, I get everybody to meditate. I'm pretty assertive around pushing people to develop the muscle around meditation. Most of them aren't going to be able to sit for, 45, 60, 90 minutes or whatever I can do, because they're not going to have that kind of muscle, but they can build it from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 20 minutes. Some of these athletes I coach meditate 20, 30 minutes a day, and that's pretty impressive for, a 23-year-old kid that's in minor league baseball or whatever it is, right? Or some of the pro soccer players I coach, they're all meditating a fair amount, the D1 athletes. So you can, even with ADD, these kids can meditate. When someone says to me, that they can't meditate because they have ADD, I just laugh. I'm like, that's the purpose, to train your mind, pal. Not just the stimulants, right? And the truth is, we can all meditate. We got to build that muscle, and as we build it, there are different techniques, right? There are different ways of doing it. I just teach basic breath, but I almost never. I just use chakra points, like energy centers, right? So I'm not using the basic breath, but I do use breath work techniques to help me as a golfer and to help the kids, play better under pressure. Right.
Beautiful, beautiful. And do you have them use apps or music or audio, or Tell me a little bit
Yeah,
more about
so
that.
that's where we play with it. Like everything else, we're playing with life, right? It's all
Yeah.
some sort of dance, right? So for
Mhm.
some kids, basic breaths. For some, it's a candle. For some, it's headspace or calm. For some,
Mhm.
it's a mantra. I spent years doing transcendental meditation, which is just, in my worldview, a fancy way of saying you use a mantra, right?
Yeah.
Like Om, you repeat 12,000 times. I have this funny
Yeah.
story around my mantra is I used to own a house in Westport, Connecticut, and I would just meditate in the basement for like an hour a night or more. And I would repeat this mantra a million times. And I got to a place of total, complete stillness once for a brief moment. And I got so excited, I popped out of it and never got back to that level of stillness ever again. Like, crazy though, but I got what the yogis talk about in terms of deep still.
Yes.
I have the distinction there. Right, and I've also
Amazing.
had other crazy experiences in meditative states because everything's energy, right? And when you play with
Mhm.
energy, it's inside. When we go inside, there's a lot of horsepower in there. And we live in an external world, as you know, and most people don't. They don't really go inside enough. And I'm teaching both, right? So you go inside for answers, but you do self-expression when someone pisses you off, like, right? So you're
Yeah.
doing both. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So, Dr. Brett, can you share what is one final thought that you want to leave the listeners with from our conversation today on conquering those obstacles that are holding us back?
Yeah, well, learn to be a proactive motherfucker here about life. Like, the more proactive you are, the better, really, everywhere.
Be proactive. Love it. And I know that you've got these ways for people to stay connected with you. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, just drbrettdenkin.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me. That's my big website. Also have another website, drbrettsjourney.com.
Mm,
And so either of
great.
those websites is a great way to connect with me. We have all kinds of programs on there and courses and
Mm.
my ebook. And I'm writing other books, by the way, which is fun.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Well, it was so great to chat with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your story and how man, you came from that place and overcame it, and you are taking real action in your life and encouraging and supporting so many thousands of people. It's just been a pleasure to be with you here today.
All right. Thanks so much, Amy.
And for those who have listened to Power to the People Pleasers, stay tuned for our next episode coming soon. Have a great day.